The moon is so important because the moon is how you actually react and respond to certain emotions and feelings in the actual chart. It is literally the only planet in your chart that can quote unquote make decisions, which is why we focus on the fixed star in that way, and we consider it the seat of the soul, or where you pass through in this realm to incarnate. Think about it. The moon is the mother of this realm, and your mother is the mother of your life, right? And you have to pass through her to get here. So when you understand that, it helps you articulate where you came from, specifically on a more of an esoteric level when you're passing through dimensions, to actually get down here to Earth, to be able to identify where you came from an astrological perspective. In 3D, you get a physical body. In 4D, you're like an asteroid. In 5D, you're like a planet. In 6D, you're a star. In 7D, you're a solar system. In 8D, you're a galaxy. In 9D, you're a universe. So you do your thing.
Welcome to a Soul Communication podcast. We've talked a lot about light language and communication with various beings, but the piece that's been missing is to understand planetary alignments, our role in this galaxy, in the solar systems, and how perhaps us being born in this reality in certain moment in time actually plays a difference. So I have incredible guest. His name is Joe at Soular Systems. Welcome, Joe. And Joe actually understands how planets and astrology work in terms of our incarnation here. Because each time we come here, we have new lessons to learn. So these different experiences are all tied to the moment we are born here. As a esoteric astrologist and someone who understands the soul and astrology, how those two connect, we get in so much bombardment of solar flares from the sun. Like today, when we record in this, we had X 8.7, which is one of the strongest solar flares we've experienced in 6 years. How all of that is affecting our blueprint and affecting our ascension process and awakening process. I'm ready to jump into astrology with you and whatever that takes us.
Yeah, for sure. What I like to start out with is basically giving like a small definition so people can understand why astrology is essentially the tool that we use to understand the building blocks of the universe. And that quote that I typically use is that astrology is the technical understanding of the energetic influences in this realm. So if we want to start out with more of a dimensional understanding, which is what I think a lot of your previous episodes were on, we can begin to get an understanding of the archetypes of those building blocks as a whole, right? So we'll utilize the solar flares as a convenient example because there's a very interesting alignment that a lot of people that are more deeply understanding of the astrology community may bring up, which was the Carrington event from, I believe, 1862, where it was the first time in a long time when Uranus was also in Taurus during that time. And anytime we know about Uranus being in Taurus, it doesn't really like being there. That planet, as well as that sign, don't go along well together. And the interesting thing about that is Taurus is at home in the planet of Earth. Not a lot of people in the astrology community actually talk about Earth. When every time they talk about Taurus, they talk about its exaltation in the moon, which means its favorite place to be, or its home sign in Venus, which is its co-ruler, but they don't talk about its actual ruler, which is Earth. So if we think about those two things right now, Uranus being that kind of too addicted to his prescription, that's a little crazy, a little rebel, a little bit unique, especially with his exaltation in Aries. People tend to ignore that kind of like chaotic side, and they like to embrace the unique rebel. But talking about Earth in that way, and then talking about Uranus and them two together, when Uranus actually aligned with the sun yesterday, we had our most intense solar flare, right? So if we put those two things together, chaotic, instability, that uncle that kind of likes to invest his last savings in Bitcoin at the top of the market, you know what I'm saying? If we put those two things together and we put the solar flares together, that alignment in itself is a chaotic thing that is here to not necessarily destabilize in a bad way or a good way, we don't know yet, but it is put here to create an unstable ground and actually destabilize our environment, which is what's happening in some way. We may not see it yet. We may not see it or understand it right away, but it's here and it's happening. And that's what's going on specifically at the time of Uranus charging up the sun in our direction. Because
Yeah.
solar flares happen all the time. They just don't hit us at
Yeah,
this magnitude.
right. You probably looked at my chart. My Venus is in Taurus, and Uranus came into my chart about half a
Yeah.
year ago, a little
I was,
more. And I had some things that I experienced, like some jobs that I lost. This electrical energy that you're talking about is very uncomfortable for my Venus, who likes to be very comfortable and relaxed, and the goddess who just has everything going for herself. She likes foods. She likes to have her spa appointments and not rush and be like in this hustle mode. And I am feeling a huge shift in my own personal life where I'm like in this hustle, right? And it's very charging. And at the same time, because of this energy, I started these Kundalini activation workshops, which is all about the electrical energy being the conduit for that divine flow and transmissions. So I can see, like in my personal life, where it's manifested. We as collective going into that energy,
mm,
everyone is going to feel that jitter that I'm feeling in my field all the time.
oh, most definitely. Yeah, how it affects most people in an external sense, it's not really bad, but it's really poking at whatever you used to define as stable or like comfortable, and it's just shaking it up in a very abrupt way. But it's interesting because when it's actually in its detriment or its fall, it's almost like how people imagine those cartoons where there's a ghost or some type of demon or ghoul that needs your permission to be allowed into the physical vessel. So it's like it can shake you up as much as it wants internally, but it's still your decision at the end of the day to manifest it externally, which I always find is an interesting thing because people don't necessarily take those aspects into account. So what I do
Mhm.
a little bit differently than galactic astrology, which was what we talked about a little bit before we went live, is the only difference that I have with it is I don't necessarily like to use the fixed stars for anything except your moon sign, because what a lot of people don't understand about astrology, and specifically Western astrology, is that Western astrology has absolutely zero to do with the stars. So when people say their star sign and they reference their sun sign or their Western astrology sign, that literally means like nothing in accordance with the stars, because how we calculate the signs in Western astrology is based off the seasons or the 30-degree spaces in the sky, which are what actually contain the constellations. So if you're going to use a specific constellation, you would want to reference the 88 constellations that are recognized in our ecliptic at this time. And how you use it necessarily is you find the specific degree on your moon that angles a specific constellation and star, and you can utilize that to help better understand your mentality or your operating system, right? Because when we talk about a soul and we talk about a specific carving out of the collective whole, we're talking about your specific emotion, your specific opinion, your specific feeling on that certain space, which is what people ignore when they need to actually go through.
Why moon matters more. In the moment that the person is born, there is alignment in the sky. Maybe talk to us why that alignment affects us in certain way, or it
Yeah,
develops the soul's trajectory.
of course. To break down the astrological, first of all, the astronomical aspect of it, the moon is one of the only planets in our solar system that actually reflects light, whether you know it or not. Like the other planets don't necessarily reflect light the same way the moon does. That's like its entire thing in our solar system, along with having gravity on the water, which will eventually lead to into your emotions and feelings, which is what the energetic understanding of it is. But how you calculate your chart is at your point of birth, you take down your location, your birthday, and your birth time, which helps you understand your specific signs for all the planets. You need your birth time specifically to actually calculate your houses and your ascendant and your alignments, and more specifically, the moon, because the moon moves 1 degree every 2 hours. You need to calculate the sub degrees, which are called minutes, to get the most specific reading on what your actual fixed star is. And why you do it in that way and why the moon is so important is because the moon is how you actually react and respond to certain emotions and feelings in the actual chart, right? It is literally the only planet in your chart that can quote unquote make decisions, which is why we focus on the fixed star in that way. And we consider it the seat of the soul, or where you pass through in this realm to incarnate. Because think about it, the moon is the mother of this realm, and your mother is the mother of your life, right? And you have to pass through her to get here. So when you understand that, it helps you articulate where you came from specifically on a more of an esoteric level when you're passing through dimensions to actually get down here to earth, to be able to identify where you came from. Now, it doesn't necessarily always mean that's where you came from in a past life, but what it certainly always means is that you were born.
I'm not a fan of the moon. I'll start with that, even though
Yeah, go
my
for it.
moon is in Cancer, so it's at home. But in terms of it being a planet, I don't feel it's a planet per se. I feel it's more like a satellite that has been actually placed there to control us and our consciousness. There's been a lot of like downloads, not just from me, from spiritual community, where we actually remember how there was a moment in time, maybe not here on this earth in 3D, maybe it was more Tara 5D, where there was no moon. So I'm curious your take on that, on the moon itself, but I understand the influence it has on us and our psyche.
The moon in itself would be a fifth dimensional being per se. So it's like, why would it be there? It would just be you. If you were living on 5D Earth, you would be a moon technically. So it wouldn't be there. That's people don't understand the dimensional aspects of the vessels that you carry, right? Because it's from an astrological perspective. In 3D, you get like physical body. In 4D, you're like an asteroid. In 5D, you're like a planet. 6D, you're a star. In 7D, you're a solar system. 8D, you're a galaxy. In 9D, you're a universe. So you do your thing.
So do you think it's possible that the satellite was placed here in some ways for this specific earthly project to be the way it is and for us to have this particular 3D human experience?
Yeah, sure. If you wanted to craft a realm, you got to craft the mentality, the vessel, the experience, the vibration, the frequencies that they're going to experience. So yeah, of course, higher beings crafted it. I don't think it's any malefic intent from like their perspective, because it's like if we're going down the rabbit hole of an offshoot of a slave race that turned into a cargo cult.
That's an interesting thought. But let's go back to the astrology and the moment you're born. So the moon, basically, based on the degree it's in, is essentially giving us a better understanding of our emotional standing and some of the potential contracts and soul lessons we decided to learn here. Does that relate at all, or do you think it's consequential?
It's not the moon specifically. It would be the moon's nodes, which for your Vedic astrologers out there, Rahu and Ketu, or the North Node and the South Node, right? And what's interesting about that is people conflate a lot of the specifics. Like they like legitimately signed a contract. So it would be the esoteric equivalent of, oh man, I shouldn't have got that 30-year mortgage. I should have got a 15-year mortgage at a better interest rate. I can't refinance it because I told myself I can't, but you really can. It's not like textbook or mercurial bullshit like that. It's more or less like you need to go in this energetic direction, which could be better identified by the house you have that placed in. Right? You're actually early degrees Leo, and it's semi-conjunct Mars.
I'm on stage. I know. I'm stepping into the North Node. It's been very uncomfortable, but the last, I would say, 4 years, I've been with the Pluto going through my ascendant, which is in Capricorn. I've been learning how to go beyond this level of how others perceive myself and more kind of stepping on the stage. Doing the podcast has been more seen and being more on the stage and just being me. This is the energy of the Leo that is very, all the actors, I'm thinking of Jennifer Lopez as like the Leo queen.
Most definitely. But it's interesting with that because it's like you are stepping into your lessons, but it's like the way Mars does it, it makes you hit it hard once you do, which is fun in a way because you're out here, you're doing it now, and it's just like, I can't complain. Like everything I've seen you've done is very well polished and like very well done, which I'm not surprised. It's why it's, you know, taken off so well. Because honestly, it's a quality over quantity right now. But what's interesting is how I see Pluto hitting your South Node in some way, because it's a split dynamic between your ascendant, which is what you feel like you have to do, what you're getting out of. Like you feel like there's so much pressure on you to become the most like exalted, powerful version of self that you can think of. But now with Pluto moving into the second house, it's almost shit. I worked on status this much, and then I don't have as much to show for it as I thought. So what's the point? And it's interesting because Pluto retrograde in a general sense is putting people in this position of where they're recognizing and like almost living with their subconscious in a way. In like the quote of it's just like, oh, the 5 people I hang out with the most, that's like the best representation of my personality. Shit, I don't want to hang out with these motherfuckers. They're terrible. Why am I with them? So it's people are really like getting into this space of they don't necessarily want to be stuck with the same people, and they're really like thinking hard about their groups in an association. But how it works for you with your South Node, or what I'm just speculating off of just briefly looking at your chart, is you're in the space of I worked on myself. I helped so many people. Why can't they help me now? So now it's almost, you're going to start dipping into getting your like foot on people's necks.
I haven't gotten to that place of release of that control of editing, but it's funny you say that because I have thought about it, that I'm behind on some of my videos.
Oh, you want to know a hack to get around that? So basically what you want to do, or what I've done a lot, is you just pretend you are a video editor, but it's like you get into video editing Facebook groups, specifically Filipino editing Facebook groups, or like more like people that have like lower wages in different parts of the world. And you just go in there, just talk about video editing. And they're like, oh, hey, would you mind editing my videos? Oh, here, could you edit this at a rate?
It's interesting. The challenge is because of my content that is not in always earthly language. I don't know if you've seen some of the episodes, they're in light language. And what's interesting, some of the editing tools don't recognize this language unless you know what you're doing. Like these people, whoever you said in Philippines, might get lost in understanding and thinking it's just noise, but actually there's like a channeling behind it. So for me, content means awareness and consciousness. And I think anything that we do, whether you're doing a reading for someone, you put in a lot of your intention into it and wanted to make sure there's a certain level of sacredness around it. And I feel everything that I've put in out in the world has that. I'm always putting a lot of intention and consciousness around quality for sure, and what it represents as part of myself. So I think that's where I guess I am struggling. But my understanding is Pluto went through Capricorn, where I had my ascendant, so I experienced it a lot. And it is this Phoenix energy, which I really resonate with. And we actually started calling our Kundalini activation workshops Phoenix Rising. Pluto is going into this deep transformational period, and each time is being reborn again and again. So I think as a collective, Pluto just went into Aquarius, then it's retrograding and coming back into Aquarius. Maybe talk a little more about what that means, not just on a personal level, but on the consciousness level, as it's here for the next 20 something years. And the last time my understanding Pluto was in Aquarius is when we experienced French Revolution and American Revolution. I feel that is important for us to know. There's the Uranus that is revolutionary so much, and then Pluto together, they really shake the ground.
So in a general sense, what it's going to mean is you're going to see a lot of technological advances, a lot of like new ways for people to create groups and interact with each other. But touching on the side of more what people call in a technical sense, mundane astrology, America was founded when Pluto was in 27, 28 degrees of Capricorn. What's interesting about that is America was founded during Cancer season. So it's like that kind of like opposition, push and pull, which is why people may feel that there's two like classes in America, like the political oligarchs and then the people that are like, nah, pick a white fence, red door. Let's hope for the American dream. I hope inflation doesn't get us. Buy gold. So there's like that discrepancy. So when we're dipping in and out of those two things and we're talking about revolution, we have to like think about what was the revolution then and what is the revolution now? Because over all that time, we're dealing with a lot of secrets. What was that hidden class that kind of founded America doing? And all of those things are coming out right now. And honestly, they've been coming out for the past couple of years, with that degree basically passing. And now we're retrograding on it for the third time. So it's going to be the final release of that actual secrecy being created before it's all laid out here. And what's interesting about it is it's every little subsect of an online group that's forming is getting a different piece of whatever those secrets are, just because it's so much and we're so overwhelmed by it that we're almost like desensitized to it in some way. So it's going to be a long time before we actually see some type of revolution that's going to occur. And what I like to remind people of is that the main reason that America came to power in that way is because of like financial tools that they created, how the dollar underpins global trade, right? And what I like to remind people is that the dollar wasn't actually implemented till 10 years after America was founded. So we're not really going to see any of this necessarily revolution type activities for another, honestly, 10 years of, or maybe 5 to 10 years of where it's actually going to have the shit hit the fan to the way that people may think or imagine or lust after. And what I find interesting about that is the combination of how Hollywood controls the minds and all that stuff, right? Because think about the most popular shows that came out like 5, 10 years ago, like The Walking Dead, all of this post-apocalyptic stuff. So when we think about that, we have to think about like how
Mm.
the internet, Pluto and Aquarius, is affecting the general consciousness as a whole. What's being put out there? What are the light orbs and chakra wheels that the powers that be are having us create for them in the esoteric realm so they can use them and manipulate them?
It
So,
was Greta Vargas. She talked about how she sees different timelines in dreams. And what was fascinating, she saw a timeline after 9/11 where we
yeah.
actually ended up accelerating this kind of ascension awakening timeline so much that it created separation of states, and then it created a real revolution, and we were moving so fast, it was wars and
Uh,
chaos. And she actually was like, no, I don't want that timeline. And she asked, what about the AI timeline? This is before AI was here. I actually showed her and said, actually, the AI timeline is not
mm,
as bad. The AI timeline is more gentle, and maybe in some ways because people are a bit more subservient. We move it together, like you said, with Uranus, with the technology, and we use an AI for a benefit, but it's creating revolution and change, but maybe not as fast as we imagined. But I'm still curious because there are a lot of in the spiritual community, I would say, downloads or pings about potentially something happening in the fall of 2024. Do you see anything in your reading of astrology of what might happen? And maybe it has to do with politics and the elections. There is some sort of big change that everyone's picking up from the collective.
oh yeah, Mars is going retrograde in Cancer again over the winter, and the last time Mars was retrograde for that long, it was lockdown. So probably that, and then it's in Cancer too. On America is actually like the foundation of what it was about sign, and Cancer home. So we got two people running that nobody really likes.
Another lockdown of sorts.
Another one.
I'm wondering if you looking all the way to 2030, because in my visions, I see 2030, even 2027 being completely different reality. Like in human design system, Ra downloaded that in one of the podcasts. We talked about that new types of children are going to come in because the energy is completely going to change. Um, Curious from your astrological readings if you new types of children altogether, like who calls them rev children in 2027, there's going to be completely different shift in energy. So we are going through this transitional change right now between now and 2027, and this new earth reality that everyone speaks about feels like really starts going to start building up around that time period.
Yeah, that kind of ties into all the solar flares that we've been experiencing because it's like
Yes.
to bring it all the way back to the planets being in like certain dimensional understandings. But you may have noticed in the beginning that I referenced Uranus being like your prescription degreasing uncle, or in a more direct term, your crackhead uncle. And basically, that's what Uranus is. Neptune is your grandma, Saturn's the father, and the moon's the mother, so on and so forth. Then that kind of makes Earth the little younger daughter that's beginning to hit puberty and stuff like that. So it's like becoming more of an adult planet, or it's becoming more of an adolescent planet. So in terms of seven, what I would say is that's when a lot of the children from Neptune and Aries, along with Pluto and Aquarius, are going to hit. So these spirits living in the world where, from our perspective, the dream is to create a new, and then it's a lot of like technological power that's going on because Aries is it does well in Pluto, for lack of a better term. So what I see right now is it'll just be a higher level of the first kids of the internet coming up because it's just I'm sure you remember all the trends of it's just like, oh man, these pandemic babies or something else. So it's going to be like that on steroids, where it's maybe a almost like a new expected thing that all babies are just like talking and comprehending by 8 or 9 months. So that's what I see in that, where it's just like everybody's moving so fast, everybody's like understanding all this stuff. And what I see from that, rather than it being some type of like big celestial event, is I think it's just a lot of the parents that already grew up in the internet age, right? So their brains are already wired to ascertain, learn, and absorb more information than everybody like is. Physical sense, the genes catching up so fast in regards, oh, we think we process information and we learn this fast. So it's natural that more academic, almost mercurial mindset, which personally I think makes you live slower.
Yeah, the hypercomputing is true. My kid is 11 years old, so I am experiencing that as a battle real time at home where it's me against the devices becoming really hard as a parent, even in this day and age, to curb down all that information intake, the screen time, and as you said, COVID accelerate that timeline for sure. So it's a very fine balance of seeing the chemical also disbalance in their brain and the dopamine that it the awards and rewards that they constantly seek in. And then when you disconnect them from that and teach them how to be more present or try to teach them how to be more present, it's literally like a drug addiction. They have withdrawals, they take some time to actually be present and aware of the surroundings. So I don't always necessarily see that as a positive thing. I think it needs to be a balance of technology versus just living in nature and disconnected. And maybe that's the two potential timelines that everyone is talking about, is one where technology takes over and we become a bit of cyborgs in some ways, versus like consciously choosing what technology comes in and out, where we do disconnect completely from the technology and spend more time in nature and be more organic in our evolution. If someone comes to you, I know you showed me there's some chakras that also align to different planets. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, as we mentioned before, talking about how people are so, I guess, like they get their chart calculated, what I do differently and what I mentioned earlier about how the house systems are really the signs that we have, when they actually manifest for your chart and your body, and you basically pick and choose the system that your soul goes into when you incarnate, you actually have your house systems layered out through different parts of your body. So, for those that are more well versed in it, they may notice that a lot of people actually correlate certain signs and certain elements to certain organs. But what they also do is they correlate certain signs to your body. And as we know from the discrepancy of what a sign actually is in Western astrology, you can notice that these things are the houses and you have your own individual sign.
Give me an example, maybe on my chart, or what makes sense.
So, for example, if you could
Mm.
go like from here all the way up to the crown of your head, this is your crown chakra. So on you, you would have Capricorn right here, or the technically on your chart, it's your very late degrees Capricorn, so it's more Aquarius, but it would basically be Capricorn, Aquarius, and then down here it would continue into
Mm.
Pisces. You would have Pisces in your throat chakra, which is why you like speaking about all of these esoteric things, and you can intuitively connect with people based off what they're going through quite easily and change and tune your speech in that way, because that's what Capricorn is sent to do. And then you keep going down, and it's just like you would have Aries in your heart chakra, and then so on and so forth, going all the way down to your toes, where it starts again at Sagittarius in your feet, which is cool because it's like you are grounded in your actual spiritual studies, your pursuit of higher knowledge, your
Mm.
pursuit of higher learning, and you literally walk that path. Look at what we're doing right now. We're talking about who knows what. And basically understanding these chakras, it goes quite deep because one, it helps you understand a somatic awareness of what experiences are stored in your body. So if you think about that old classic book, The Body Keeps the Score, this is the technical understanding of where, what, and why you have certain things stored in your body. And it's cool because you'll really like it with this brief understanding, because when you get downloads, you may actually begin to attune your meditations or shift your downloads in a little bit to see what is stored where. What are you storing in your shoulder? What are you storing in your abdomen? What are you storing in your thighs? What different connections and what different spirit guides can you talk to when you actually utilize different aspects of your subconscious, aka the different minds in your body, to communicate with the different minds in the sky? So there's a lot you can really get down with these actual chakras. And it's pretty fun once you get into them, because I start with a lot of people actually going through their traumas and unblocking whatever they're clinging to and whatever they're having
Mm.
resistance to. So it can actually reveal different aspects of.
I know in human design, they have like different centers, energy centers in the body. Is that similar in some ways?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar in terms of where they are. It's pretty standard for everybody. So I don't know how familiar you are with the different forms of house systems. So there's Placidus, there's whole sign, there's equal houses, so on and so forth. But for the solar map, I utilize the whole sign system to keep it simple, because it's like the chakras are basically in the same part of the body for everyone. I'll pull out the diagram. So it's basically different, I guess you would say, metrics for however your body's formed, but it's like the same space based off the same markers. So for your chart, there would be like Capricorn right here, and it's this space of the body, and then it just continues down unilaterally for all parts of the body. But what's different about the energetic centers is where you have your planets placed. So that's how you
Fascinating.
break down the varying strengths of everything. If you want to dive more deep into it, I do have a guided meditation
Yeah,
based off of
that
that. It's a fun meditation. People like it.
that would be great. Where one can find that meditation?
It's on my YouTube channel, which is the same thing, Solar_Systems, and it's under the meditation
Very
playlist.
cool. Very cool. Thank you for that. So anyone interested can check that out. I think it's really important to understand your connection to different chakras. And when you said Aries in your heart, I was like, oh yeah, that feels right for me. Like the fire in my heart is always burning.
Think about it. You have a job, you have a kid, but you still made the time to actually work on your podcast and put out a very well edited piece. As you said, massage it, which I love. So it's think about it. If you're passionate about anything, you're going to go for it. So when you actually get a little bit deeper into that, that would also reference the actual chart ruler of your heart, or the house ruler per se, which is your Mars that's actually directly aligned with your North Node, right? For you, no matter what you do or no matter what you actually go through, fear doesn't really affect you that much. It may delay things at a certain point, but it's never been like a doubt in your mind if you're going to do something or not. That kind of leads to a question that I have for you, which is what's the most recent little triumphant moment that you had?
My workshops that are right now expanding with our dear friend Chris, who referred me to you, and we coined ourselves Phoenix Rising. So it's just really holding that space and container for others to transform. And so this last activation workshop that we had is usually 3 hours where we do cacao ceremony, which is all about opening the heart. I'm always about the heart. So that makes sense. And also I feel like and like my soul and where I come from as a Lyran being, like the heart is what's most important. Obviously, the portal to the universe and beyond, and we are the heart. Seeing these moments of transformation for people or more people being activated is really exciting for my soul. It's just like when more people awaken to the true nature of who they are.
Oh, that's nice. I'm like awakening people. It's always a good time. What do you think about like the timeline of, because in my opinion, when people get more awakened, they just become more aware to what is, right? Which is equally good and bad. So it's just, what do you think about the timeline of where people are almost in that like riding high of, I gained new awareness, then they're like, oh shit, what do I do with this? Where they're just like going through their day-to-day job and they're just being like, it was a lot easier not knowing. Now I got to do a pivot table on a spreadsheet and I got to think about all these different star beings being in my brain.
Yes, I experience that on a daily basis. So that's I live very, yeah, those dualistic lives and somehow managed to dance between them, but it's becoming harder because I think the fire in my heart always wants to expand, and I don't feel that spreadsheet is where I expand or I really create ripples of love and more heart openings for others. Love ripple, I feel, came the mission of everything that I'm doing. It connects to the heart and it's about touching someone else. And as they awaken, they will go out and ripple it out into the world and wake up others. You can inspire one person, and why I'm doing this podcast, that is enough because they might get some truth or somewhere there's a resonance and they will take it somewhere else and will inspire others. So we create these ripples of love through our experiences in this earthly realm. And that's kind of, I feel, is why I'm here and why I'm meant to do what I'm meant to do, but ultimately connects back to that unified field. So bringing that dual and polarization into unified, I feel, is also my role. To really sit in neutral these days as much as possible has been somewhat of a challenge, but also a good challenge because even being really compassionate about people who just don't understand. For instance, I posted a video of one of the Kundalini activations where I was doing my thing. It was at the end of 3 hours. I was super activated, a lot of energy and fire and Mars and me and being Phoenix. And the person was as well. So he was moving quickly and I was doing my thing. And we were in it. And I felt like I posted something like that before and people just might not understand. So I posted a bit of a warning. And yet there were those who resonated, but also it got a lot of backlash, and to the point where I had to take the reel down yesterday because it got really low vibrational in the comments. And there was this moment where I questioned whether I felt like it fulfilled its provocation, it fulfilled its purpose in some ways, and but also didn't want to create a space for others to throw out the consciousness garbage, as I call it. And it just wasn't serving anymore. So it was a conscious choice to take it down, which I've never done before. But I realized maybe the world is not fully yet ready publicly to see this. And they also, in such polarized states right now, they're not really seeing the unified field. They're not seeing that energy is everything. You can be playful with it. You can be aggressive with it. That's what they call it. You can be anything, or you can be gentle. There's no right or wrong. Everything is perfect.
I always have fun with negative comments because I always counteract them in a way of where it's. I used to do it very aggressively, of where I would just. It wasn't good. I would just make them feel bad about themselves because I was just. Oh man, you think you're so tough? Literally last week I had to fight a mountain lion off the side of a mountain, which is a true story. But it's obviously naturally you very quickly evolve out of that and just be like, hey man, what happened to you? Do you? I'm doing me. Are you not doing you? Do you need some help? What's going on? So it was always interesting in the dynamic shift of I feel like there's going to be so many like studies on what it meant to be a spiritual content creator in this like day and age, because it's just like it's so evolving in terms of like you could do.
Absolutely. Those of us who actually walk in the path, it's almost like harder to put what you really want. And this was an example because people maybe not ready fully for it for various reasons. Either they have a FOMO about that experience, or they, like I said, very quick in judging what it is and what it's not. Exactly. The marketing aspect of spirituality and what I call fake light is fascinating because there's a lot of fluff out there. And ultimately, we need to really resonate with some of the content that we see in. And not everyone is yet. Sometimes being a pioneer is a hard thing. And then you have to draw back and see where it makes sense, where it's not. Maybe same type of messaging can come through in a different type of form and not create this havoc, which I felt like I was commenting back. But then it broke that threshold where it started attracting these very negative energies. And I was like, got you. I don't want to create a container for that. Because I'm here to be in unified field and I want to hold the sacredness of that unified field and what that means. I want to stay neutral. I don't want to be sucked into the swamps. I'm on the mountain and continuing the work behind the scenes. You're still doing it. It's just that not everything has to be seen or understood. So it's a tricky thing to be on stage. I have to say, to be on the Leo stage, I'm learning as well. It's new.
Oh yeah, no, you definitely got to get in tune with your guides, because I have a couple colleagues that posted a lot about like more occult information that they shouldn't have, and the repercussions of that they specifically did during their Saturn return. It wasn't good. They had to spend a lot of time in the jungle of a third world country, not doing anything, waiting time out. But yeah, so be very careful about that. I've seen that go left for a lot of people.
It was on my Love Ripple Academy account, so it's my personal where I post everything. So I have people who follow. And like I said, there were those who were like, oh, this is fun, and people who resonate, and those who like in a community and they know. But I think the backlash came from people who like saw it through some hashtags and have certain limitations on what they think Kundalini activation is, or like some of the comment, oh, is this a joke? Oh, this is fake. This is an actor, even though the person is like wearing a mask. And the person, it was just like backlash is coming from different directions, but even from our own community, which just really revealed the ego. It really put it into more clarity. And in some ways, it was like those moments, remember in COVID, where we like all of a sudden seen the truth. And I think we are in the age of revelations right now, where the truth is really coming out, like you were saying, like in a disclosure, right? That's another one. So in some ways, I'm feeling sometimes provoking and putting this type of, it was a conscious thing. I was like, let me see on this consciousness experiment game where everyone is. And it was clear where it is. And then I had to pull it back. But I was like, I feel like what I wanted out of it, I got. And unfortunately, we're not there yet fully. I know it will take time, but just because calling yourself spiritual, yeah, a lot of it is glossy. A lot of it It sells better if it's very sexy or it's portrayed in a certain way that's still fluffy. It's not real. But people buy into that because they don't really want to go deep. So what I'm seeing is that sometimes it's just like scratching the surface just enough, but no one really wants to do the Pluto work. So it will be really interesting how Pluto is gonna tear that seal off.
Yeah, how it'll touch on for a lot of people that are at least in their they're like at least 15 by now, they'll probably experience the vibration from this Pluto retrograde right now for the entirety of their lives, of bending those like pivotal foundational years with riding the majority of their adulthood into their older age with a group that they may or may not resonate with, which is, is going to be quite interesting about this Pluto and Aquarius trope of where tribalism is going to get very much more popular, because what a lot of people don't know, and what's also coming up with these solar flares, it's bringing up how outdated our electrical grid is, which is going to be very, what's the word, definitive of the haves and the have-nots based off who like is lit up versus who isn't. So that is where things going to get interesting regarding that, and where people are going to be bouncing.
I was just literally thinking about that because I was reading how some devices were taken down, the ones at 30 hertz and below.
Yeah. It's just basic radio stuff. What I was talking about is the actual power grid,
Yeah.
and how a lot of it is still from like sub 1960, and it would literally take billions of dollars to actually get it up to date, because all of the things that are actually coming online right now, it's like it can't even sustain it. And the problem with the power grid in itself, from a basic understanding, because I'm not an electrical engineer by any means, is that a lot of the frequencies that the alternating current is moving at is very sporadic. So that's why we have a lot of inverters on our house and whatnot, basically like cleaning up all that dirty electricity, because we have a lot of electricity out there, but it's not as efficient and it's not being utilized as much.
Yeah. I feel like we jump in timelines, but I'm not ruling out the potentiality, because I saw it, of potentially losing an electrical system altogether and being a complete shutdown. That is, yeah. No fun. Yeah, I don't like it. I feel like it's there. I see it, but I think we get to choose whether we want it or not.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, maybe invest in some solar generators of sorts. I don't know.
Nah, I got a friend that can help me with that. It's okay. What's interesting is, did you know that your and Chris's moon degrees are very close?
Not surprised.
Oh, you're not surprised, huh? Yeah, specifically, you guys are about 3 degrees apart. Based off birth year, it's a little more than that. So it's 4, but it's still pretty cool. Different constellations, but it's very close.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we actually in the field and we do our Kundalini activation workshops, sometimes the energy is so similar that people can't even tell whether it was her or I. So that makes sense, because we knew we were moon in Cancer. I didn't realize the degrees were close as well. So there is that when it comes to the work and this type of work with capital W. I think there's strong alignment and loyalty to the work and the path we're on.
I don't know what the Greek letter of it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a little circle. It's like an O with a tilde on top of it almost. If that makes any sense. So it's like a tilted Q almost. But it's basically the star next to the left head of the Gemini twins, which is, the Gemini twins are known as Pollux and Castor. And your star is literally right next to Pollux, the left twin. So it's interesting because from the spiritual perspective, that is the right-sided twin. But from our perspective, it's the left twin, right? Basically, it's like the natural order of the universe is chaos, and spiritual left is like the uncertain. But from the spiritual perspective, that is the right way to go about things. So it's a very interesting shift of where the unorthodox ideas of how the world should have operated was always obvious to you, which kind of plays into why that Gemini energy kind of trined your south node, of where you were just waiting for the right group of people for you to be around to actually utilize and leverage those unorthodox ideas, which is when it actually moved into the sextile with your north node, of where once you finally had that opportunistic click, everything became clear and you could actually utilize them. So while you could say you spiritually laid dormant, you were just absorbing and collecting as much information about spirituality as you possibly could, till it was the right time to actually move forward and utilize it. So it's interesting when you see things in that way because it really has the night and day of Gemini, of where it's like you just absorb and gather as much information as possible,
Mm.
almost like the sea scraping method of fishing, and you just gather up everything. And then once you actually find the right community, that community is what actually distills the information you utilize. So when we're ignoring spiritual perspective, it's more or less like you almost like surf different aspects of your own mind based
Mm.
off of the communities that you are with at a specific time and the ones you actually care about, which is interesting about a lot of the moon and cancers that we have in this day and age, because it's like they really are Gemini moons that are moving through a Cancerian space. So you can
Mm.
almost see this almost like detached look in their eye that you wouldn't have in a normal Cancer moon, because that's more warm, it's more loving, it's more caring. But from the more Gemini aspect, it's more technical, it's more understanding. It's almost like they're just utilizing certain traits, certain emotions, certain things that they know from a technical standpoint is what they should do, but that's not really what they're doing necessarily. So it's like an interesting dynamic of how Cancer moons these days are operating, because it's like it's not all degrees; it's more mid to late degrees, specifically from I would say 14 degrees of Cancer all the way through about 24 degrees of Cancer.
Yeah. So mine you said is in the beginning though, right? The initial degrees.
Yours? No,
Yeah.
you're at the later degrees of Cancer, the later
That's
degrees of
interesting.
Cancer that angle the Gemini constellation. Almost the late. So yeah, it's very it's almost like you always got like a computer running, like absorbing all the information around you, and what actually activates it and clicks on certain files would be the groups that you're associated with. From a Gemini perspective, it's more or less like that pure, just childlike awe of where it's just information going in and going out without any emotional perspective placed on it, right? You're just like, oh yeah, sometimes you just have a pig roast in West Virginia for no reason. Yeah, cool, let's do it. Or you're doing things like, hey, let's go check out the Large Hadron Collider. Isn't that Shiva? Nah, no, whatever. Let's keep going.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of filtering going on, a lot of I call it distortion metering. So that there is a lot of that. Throughout my lifetime, I also moved a lot and been in different cultures and different parts of the world where I grew up and different communities. And then it's almost like a phoenix. I would die. So the version of myself today is very similar, but yet very different than the version of myself back then. Constant evolution. Yeah. I think it's interesting how astrology and that like also aligns with like my soul stream as a whole, because obviously at this point I remember most of my key, I would say, lifetimes on earth and beyond. And so it has been, I think, that observer self because of the experiences and maybe that emotion has and dissociation has happened just because of all these experiences through space and time and seeing, because we're here on earth reliving, replaying dramas from our galactic past, and so we've learned from those experiences from these initial wars like in a Lyran system, and then each time, yeah, each time in each evolution, from Egyptian timeline to Mayan timeline, all these major timelines that I chose to be at, like there were things that were good, that were bad, and everything in between. So that Gemini aspect is interesting. Yeah.
Egypt was fun though. I had fun then.
Egypt was fun until it got bad, until corruption started.
That's how they get down. What was your favorite lifetime post Atlantis?
Post Atlantis. Oh, that's a good question. I think the one that I'm remembering the most, I don't know if it was most fun, but I feel like I enjoyed it until I got beheaded. I was a Mayan. And it was fun because we got to converse with the stars and we did a lot of mushroom plant medicine and cacao. And yeah, I actually found exactly what happened. It was in Tikal in Mundo Perdido, which is part of the park in Guatemala, what they call the astrological observatory with all the shamans, where really working a lot with the stars. It seemed it was in service. It was somewhat fun. I enjoyed it until the sacrifice happened. From my perspective as a human now, I feel like it was the worst thing ever because of the grotesque vision I had of it. But from that perspective, it was a natural thing. Like it was actually an honor. So I had to accept that. But I think it was an interesting lifetime. It's what we did to move on to the next lesson.
What do you think about people that you either have come across or either awakened yourself where you could just smell it on them? Like it was one of their first times, like not when they just woke up, but it was like one of their
Mm.
first lifetimes going on that, not being asleep per se. What do you think about that? Because I watch a lot of people that are physically older, but you can almost smell it on them. And it's just, oh, it's your like 200th lifetime being awakened in this body from this perspective. You're still like in awe of it, you know? Because to me personally, when I see that, I listen to what they have to say, but then they're like so obsessed with 5D. When you're so obsessed with a certain
Mm.
dimension, that kind of infers that you're not really moving beyond that. And to me, it's to each their own with whatever dimension you want to incarnate. I get personally annoyed when they're so obsessed with it. And I'm just like, hey, man, there's other
Yeah.
dimensions, other vessels,
I
other
mean,
lifetimes, other planets that you can oscillate in. Why are you so obsessed with this? Lazy. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I totally do. I think the beauty and I think of the earthly project is that we potentially have been trapped here as an angel to help this evolution. And we volunteered, but then there was some choices made beyond us on the high council level. As we got used to this, I think some of us really got to love being here. I have this deep connection to Mother Earth. And yes, she is, like you said, going to her puberty, but we've been with her for so long, helping her along the way. She's a mother to us, but we've been also mother to her, helping her to awaken. So it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship. So for me, that matters more. And those who, obsessed and they don't see beyond the dimensions. I feel in this quarantine zone, we only have access to 12 dimensions. Our Andromedan selves had many more accesses. There's certain limitations here. The more you connect to your higher self, the more you start activating your light language and connecting to all these frequencies, you start realizing it's so multifaceted, it's so multidimensional. There's so much more beyond 5D, whatever D's that we're in, all like a beautiful symphony in a soup. And all is valid and all is beautiful. And in some ways, also being grateful for having this body, being here in this particular reality, no matter how hard it seems. There's this moment of, wow, I get to experience this on individual level as I'm experiencing right now in this body. And I'm not part of a hive mind where maybe in the higher dimensional energies, you don't have as much of that individuality. You balancing it out and you're just grateful for the moment. I'm not necessarily always striving to go towards the source. I understand it's part of my mission and why we're in this ascension cycle, but I'm also trying to find these moments where I'm just really joyful to be here and just experiencing what is. And sometimes we're too serious about it. I think that came out actually in my last workshop about joy. I was doing Kundalini activation. Actually, my sister was on it, and that joyfulness keeps on coming up. I have toddler nieces and nephews, and they always like, "Mama, don't be so serious. Just have fun and play." The fairies actually remind me that a lot every time I like connect to them. It's just have fun. All of this, it's just an experience. It's just another experience. So be joyful. All of it. We need to go to that pure joy of innocence. I think we may be too serious because we've been here for so long in this particular reality game. And some people are really striving to move on and leave the trap to other realities. I don't know. I haven't made that decision. Maybe for a bit and then come back. But I think there's a lot to learn here in the interesting time paradox over here. You said you're not doing galactics, but do you look at the alignments as they related to the other, like beyond the solar system?
Yeah, I do sometimes. There's the Galactic Center, which I was thinking about asking you about. When people do talk about galactic astrology, from my perspective, like it really is just like adding the fixed stars into other alignments and other planets. That's like the one of the main focuses of that. Once again, I've never personally studied a specific course or technical understanding of how you study astrology.
Yeah, we didn't talk about your experience. Usually that's my first question, but with you, we're going first, which is great. How did you even get into astrology? It sounds like you self taught yourself.
Yeah, I pretty much self-taught myself. I got into it through a lot of youthful antics. So that's like how I got into it. And then I started studying it more in depth. Your vertex is a point in your chart of where you're going to basically discover your hidden gifts, per se. and mine's in my 8th house. So it comes from a lot of deep esoteric study and all that stuff. So it was basically just from a lot of being like 18, 19, late nights thinking to myself, having crystals in a basement at a workshop. When you first wake up and the downloads never stop, it was a lot of that. I was just looking at astrology every day. And by the point I was probably 21, I was like into it for 3, 4 years by again. I was meditating on my own, and it was like outside your body looking at an illuminated version of this. Like you would kind of, it was almost like my spirit guide was basically showing me like a 1980s cartoon equivalent of a highlighted like organ breakdown, but it was astrology purpose. And I don't know if you remember that cartoon where it was like, "Oh hey Bill, wait from the Washington D.C. This is how we turn a bill to a law." It was like kind of like that cartoon style, and it was just a lot of random experiences like that. My favorite experience, which is the foundational moment of what taught me about the fixed stars, was quantum hypnosis with Dolores Cannon.
Yes, I actually facilitate that.
Yeah, that one. I did that, and that's basically what like taught me everything I know about the fixed stars. Because I had this whole vision of where it was to Egypt, and then I was riding on a boat on the Nile. And then I became bigger and bigger, and then it was a very direct thing of this thing from behind these two constellations. And I looked it up on Google, and it looked exactly the same. And I was like, "Oh shit!" And that's what led me down the entire rabbit hole of understanding the fixed stars in the way I do, and understanding astrology in the way I do it.
So do you feel like in Egypt you were an astrologer and you knew it?
I was an astrologer in many lifetimes. I was always a dude that was like getting busy knowing stuff for no apparent reason. So that was pretty much it. Like it was always like basically same vibe. It's just like, why do you know about that? And honestly, I don't even know. I just do. And it comes up perfectly. And what I teach people explain to that is it's just like I almost want to teach like a master class on the exalted understanding of how to utilize Gemini. Because it's like what when people really get to the higher levels of actually understanding Gemini, just to go down like a little hyper niche astrological rabbit hole, is like what so you have to understand that Aries is the highest like energy that you can get to in this realm. Aries came last from a spiritual perspective. So it's just where it like comes in of where I'm an Aries moon, I have Aries in the 5th house, and this is where the ego comes in of where I want to say you're fucking stupid. You don't understand the shit because you learned it from an earthling that didn't understand the shit, and you're just kicking it down the can. You didn't go to the source and understand it like a normal person or a normal spirit, I should say. Why I'm utilizing that example is because if you flip it around and you keep going, that would basically tell you that Geminis do what Capricorns do way better than they ever can without even trying. Because if you look at it from the source, Capricorn's entire mission is to build up their mentality from the base. It doesn't matter what they're working towards, they're going to get there no matter how long it takes. Whereas Gemini, from the equivalent perspective of building a mentality, they're window shopping. They're already light in a space where they can dance between different mentalities as they choose. And it was activated based off different groups you were in.
I call it shape shifting, like window shopping, shape shifting, moving in and out between different realms and spaces.
Yes, that's like the after effect. But what I'm trying to explain to you is I'm trying to explain to you a different way to think and store information. Because the way Geminis think, if they really get to a high level about it, is they can literally leverage and almost use like the frequency that a group's hive mind on as a springboard to a different mentality. And what I mean is the information, all of the information stored at that space and that frequency. Because when you get into the spirit world, frequencies and vibrations are physical spaces and locations, which is why in the beginning of the podcast, when you were like, when I was on 5D Torah and there was no moon, that's because you were in the space and the location of where the moon was probably an individual being that looked exactly like you did when you were there. So when we talk about that and we actually utilize the higher levels of Gemini, you can begin to understand that the Gemini mind is very equivalent to RAM rather than hard drive space, of where you're moving to different spaces and locations, and all you're really storing in your body is the direction to how to get to certain information. So there you can move, no pun intended, light language speeds and really access and download information like it's nothing, which is why Geminis, in my opinion, are one of the smartest zodiac signs if they actually get to that higher level and understand what they're doing, how they're intuitively speaking information.
That is a beautiful breakdown. Totally resonates. Makes sense because for me, that's exactly how it works as well. In terms of directions too, I have this really deep sense of direction. I always had since I was a little girl. And I've traveled twice around the world and been to places very remote where there was no directions at all in the middle of really nowhere, some jungles, and somehow was always feeling very safe. And I always knew how to navigate that. So that just explained a lot. And of course, not just physically, but also in ceremonies that I used to facilitate with plant medicine as well. I'm very comfortable in these different realms, even though I don't always understand them. Somehow I know how to get out of them. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here you go. Gemini, it's all Gemini.
I'm a Gemini. I do it all the time. On May 25th, Jupiter and Gemini. And if you did like the information that you heard about Gemini and you want to learn things like that, on that specific day, I am launching my own personal like course platform where I'm going to be teaching astrology in the way that I see it for everybody. And if you watch my videos and you've seen me say, follow to level up as a spirit, and you actually want to level up in a very structured way where you actually take certain courses to unlock new courses and actually get up in a way where you can practically use astrology like the way I just explained, I'm launching that on May 25th in the more of a private round. So just find me on the internet somewhere and then just get on my mailing list and then we got you. But basically, that touches into it also practically using astrology. Like the whole thing that you want to do with Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is you want to actually get like communities together in ways that you understand it. With Jupiter and Gemini and all the planets moving into Gemini, like Uranus and whatnot, basically what it's doing is it's destabilizing the tangible physical location, like education space, where people are like, fuck a 4-year degree. Right. Why can't I just pay a course and get a hyper specialized skill for something that I know that can translate to something right now? So that's what that alignment is doing. So how you actually utilize that for your own benefit is you get your own privatized group together where you can actually be like, hey, we're working on this. We're learning this. You like this information? Here it is. So that's like what all of that trine specifically is. Now, Jupiter and Gemini, in its specific sense, you will resonate with because it's the more mischievous side of Gemini. It's going to amplify the malefic side of Jupiter, but it's not going to do it in a bad way. It's going to give you a lot of information. It's going to give it very bluntly, very coldly, no emotion, almost in a childlike, goofy way. And it may even do it intentionally to get a rise out of you because if you want to catch fish, you have to stir up the waters, which is exactly what Gemini does well with its square with Pisces, no pun intended. So if we understand that and we utilize that, it's like the same Gemini energy of where it just wants to get a rise out of you. And then it may get you to the point of where you are freaking out, especially when Uranus gets in the mix, because Uranus is going to be like that, like crazy kid and it's going to be like, whoa, man, you're doing too much. Just, hey, man, I was just joking. I knew I was going to actually give you what you want. Calm down. It's like that thing of where it's gonna fuck with you, but at the same time, it's gonna give you what you want. So it's odd where it's a lot of people think Jupiter's just it's great. Where it's no, what comes after Jupiter? Saturn. It'll give you a gift. Then it'll be like, open the door. Here you go. Here's Saturn. Can you sustain it? No. All right, take it away. Now you get to taste it and never have it again because you didn't do the work to sustain it. That's the malefic side of Jupiter. But the thing is, this, if you can actually pass its test and sustain it, you'll learn a lot. You'll do a lot. You'll be successful. Yeah, you got that little bit of Gemini in you where you're like messing with people slightly.
Oh, for sure. The trickster in me, yeah. It has been like dormant for a while, but I feel since I stepped really fully into my authenticity and my sovereignty and power, yeah, it definitely loves to do it once in a while, especially when the right time, when the right people.
That's probably because Pluto was on your ass for so long. Yeah.
Like it's the Phoenix energy, I feel it's like as much as a creator, as a destroyer, and something in between. And it's accepting the fact that we chaos beings. We're not light workers. I don't like that word. We're really chaos beings. And the chaos, which is a bit of a trickster energy, that's what we create. So that's my take on it. And yeah, that really resonates. That's very Gemini-ish, I would say. The different aspects that you can go back and forwards and somewhere in between, play the games and dance the dance, as I call it. And I think we are the creators of that reality. And so it's important for us to not comply to the rules, know what to bend them, and where perhaps as long as it's the intention is there, as long as it serves the high purpose. And especially as we navigate in this very matrixy, dense environment right now, it's important to be more playful with it too sometimes, wherever we can. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Joe, for all your insight. I feel like you and I can talk for hours down these rabbit holes of where the astrology meets reality and how we make sense of all of it. So find Joe at Solar_Systems. Is there also a website, Joe?
No, fun story about that. I had a really awesome website for a long time, but then the whole bunch of crap happened. And now it's gone. But I'm working on a new one, and you can just utilize my link in bio that I have right now if you want to find more specific information. If you're on Instagram or not, feel free to DM me. I respond to everybody, and I get into little rabbit holes like this in conversation for funsies sometimes.
Thank you so much for bringing that lightness into soul communication and what connections we can have through the astrology and the understanding of ourselves. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to see our other episodes and don't forget to subscribe.